Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another Timey Wimey Tuesday. So today, thought I'd do something a little different, kind of special to me personally. This is something I've had on the back burner for a while. I've been wanting to do just because I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to do it. So we're going to do it today. Target Books. Target Books is a name that should be familiar to longtime fans of the series. Starting in the 60s and running right through to the late 80s, Target Books did essentially novelized adaptations of darn near every single story from the classic series. Now, I say darn near everyone because there was a couple that, for whatever reason, there was some kind of rights entanglement and they just weren't able to do adaptations of those. Virgin Books eventually picked up the slack on a couple of those, but I think there's still one story that remains unadapted, specifically The Ultimate Foe, the final story of the Trial of a Time Lord series. Now, oddly enough, they did adapt the first three stories in that arc, but not the last one. So, if you're just reading the books, you'll never know how it ends, ever. Sorry. But the thing was, the thing that was really cool about the Target Books was it didn't matter if the episodes were missing or not. They still had the scripts. They could still adapt them. And that's what they did. So for a long time, the novels were actually the only way we could experience a lot of these missing adventures that had long since been lost to the halls of time. And for those of us in North America whose only option was to watch whatever PBS happened to have at the time, it was a long time before we were actually able to see even the existing first and second Doctor story and third Doctor stories. I've said on numerous occasions, I mean, for the longest time, the only stories they had were the fourth Doctor, the Tom Baker stories, and then later the Peter Davison stories. And then finally, around that time, they went back and got the first and second and third Doctor stories, and I was finally able to see those. But it was a long time. Like, I mean, I must have been watching the show for about 5 or 6 years before they finally started showing the early ones. So for the longest time, they were they were enshrouded in mystery. I would always see mention of them in Doctor Who magazine and in various specials and such that I had. But there was just no way to see them except via the Target novelizations. So that was a way to experience those early stories in some form, in lieu of being able to experience the televised versions. And that's what I did. And that's what we're going to talk about over the course of the next few Timey Wimey Tuesdays, a few specific ones I wanted to spotlight, as it were, starting today on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. So today I thought we'd talk about some of the first Doctor adventures that I experienced for the very first time in novelized form before finally being able to see the televised versions. Now, the very, very, very first Doctor story that I ever read or experienced in any form was this one, The Aztecs. And this is the exact edition that I had as well, specifically the paperback version. There was also a hardcover version of this. Very nice painted cover. Written by the same guy who wrote the script. Yeah, John Lucarotti. Yeah, so this was one of the cases where they actually got the original author of the story to do the novelization. Now, of course, since then, I now have the televised version. But The Aztecs is pretty notable in that, and I wouldn't learn this until later. To me, it was just some random first Doctor story, and saw it, grabbed it, went home, read it, and thoroughly enjoyed it. I got to say, I mean, even at the time, it's funny because at the time I was not the best history student. I actually found history class really, really boring. Now, maybe it's just the way it was taught to me. Maybe I just had a crappy teacher. Who knows? But for whatever reason, it just did not grab me very much. However, learning history through the world of Doctor Who I found fascinating and endlessly entertaining. I mean, here you have a group of time travelers who could actually go back in time to the time periods of these historical events and experience it firsthand and show it to us, the viewer, or in this case, the reader, firsthand as they learn about it and they see what's going on and such. And taking that aspect of it, what a wonderful story the Aztecs is, because it's the one where we really get the first hard lesson about not being able to change history. There's that famous line of the first doctors, you can't rewrite history, Barbara, not one line. That's great stuff, and that sums it all up right there, because that's exactly what Barbara's trying to do. And she's a history teacher. I mean, she knows how things play out in this era and what a brutal time the civilization of the Aztecs was. Yet, in spite of that, she feels that she knows better and she's going to change things. And, of course, it all goes horribly wrong. But the thing was, without having seen the televised version, all I had to go by in terms of visuals was my own imagination and that beautiful painted cover. And I have to say, I mean, it really makes a difference when you get the authors of the original scripts to do the novelizations, because nobody knows those characters, like in particular the characters for that specific story, better than the author who created them. So with the novelization of the Aztecs, I mean, I'm sure most of you have seen the televised version. I mean, it's a very tense story in a lot of ways. The novelization is even more so. Like, it gets right into the heads of the characters, including, Tlatoxel and Yetaxa and what's going on in their heads. And what, is it Yetaxa? I think so. Yeah. Oh, no, that was Barbara. Who the hell was the other guy? The warrior guy? I can't remember. It's been a while since I've watched it. But anyway, Tlatoxel and the warrior guy that is kind of friends with and enemies with Ian throughout it. But you really get inside the heads of those characters. And, I mean, you have Barbara doing what she's doing. You got the doctor trying to, sort of keep things under control. And then you got Tlatoxel and the others plotting against them. And it's really a very tense story, and the novelization takes the tension of the televised version and just ratchets it up. It's even more so. And if you've enjoyed the televised version, I definitely recommend checking out the novelization. It's one that I sadly do not own anymore. I need to reacquire it, but rest assured I will be rereading it as soon as I get it. But I should mention, the reason I don't have a lot of my original Target novels and whatnot is because, I've told this story before, I'll tell it again in brief. When I lived in Winnipeg, Manitoba, there was one time when I moved from one place to another, and I had a box which contained all of my Doctor Who Target novels, a few other Doctor Who related books, all my Marvel US Doctor Who comics. They'd basically done a series of reprints of the Doctor Who magazine comics, reprinted in color for the first time. I had the full run of those. They did 23 issues and then the 4 Marvel Premiere issues. They were all there. There was a bunch of other stuff too, like all my Gru the Wanderer comics, all my audiobooks. It was a pretty packed box full of cool, geeky stuff. And I have no idea what happened to it. We got to our destination and the box was just gone. I don't know if it fell off the truck. I don't know if somebody stole it. I have no idea. No idea what happened. All I know for sure is it was gone for good. And believe me, in the 30 years since then, I have looked through every single box that I have ever owned and has ever moved with me, and there is no sign of any of that stuff. It's just gone. So one of my goals as far as the Doctor Who collection goes is to reacquire the Target novels. First and foremost, the ones that I used to have and the ones that were personally significant to me. Those are ones that I really want to get back. So anyway, the Aztecs was one of those. But yeah, I mean, that was great because, as I said, at the time, I couldn't see any of the early adventures because they just weren't on. And this was before, there were only a handful of VHS videos out at the time. They hadn't really got full swing into that yet. That wouldn't be until the early 90s. The audio tracks had not been released. We didn't have things like the Lost in Time DVDs or the, we didn't have the years videos, which would show you, missing episodes and whatnot. So really, the only way to experience the first Doctor adventures in any form was the novels. So they were really a boon to people like me. So my Doctor Who book collection tended to focus on stories that I had not seen, so that I could experience them in some way. Because, I mean, I'd seen the Tom Baker adventures several times over by this point. I wanted to experience some new stories, and I knew there was a wealth of new material out there, well, new to me anyway, that I had not seen yet. So the only option was to get the books. And as it turns out, a wonderful option, because the books are a real treat. So the next First Doctor adventure I got, and this was very, very shortly before the local PBS station started showing the early adventures. So there wasn't a big time gap between when I got the book, read it, and when they started showing them on TV. They had this book here, An Unearthly Child. And for whatever reason, this one is a really long time coming. It actually appeared quite late in the Target Books line. They'd already started going to reprints of earlier books, in addition to having the newer novelizations coming out. So this one came out, and at long last, I could experience the story of how it all began. And I remember I bought the book, and I brought it to school to show to a friend of mine who was also a huge Doctor Who fan. And I was sitting, I forget what I was doing. I was doing something away from my seat, and I couldn't get back to my desk. I was stuck, like I was doing a presentation or something, or I can't remember. And my friend went over to my desk and went into my bag, and he pulled out the book and he started reading it. And I'm just like, oh, you bastard. Like, it's like, no, you can't read it before me. And I was like, no, don't, put it back. And he's like, I was like, oh, you jerk. But needless to say, that day I ran home and just blew through the book. I really enjoyed it a lot. A lot of people crap on An Unearthly Child for being, in particular for the episodes that take place at the dawn of man. But I don't know. I always enjoyed that. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the actual, story reviews. But I don't know. I always enjoyed it because, I mean, it told you everything you needed to know. I mean, the whole purpose of that first story is to set up the premise, that these are the Doctor's a time traveler from another world. He's, they got stuck in Britain for longer than they intended. Susan was going to school there. The teachers were wondering what was going on with her. She seemed to know a lot more than she was letting on. Follow her back to the TARDIS, and then they get whisked away on an adventure in time and space. And that first adventure, it doesn't need to be any more complicated than it is. They go back in time to the dawn of man, and that proves everything to the teachers. Like, yes, this is a time machine. It actually works. We have actually gone back in time, and here we are at the dawn of man, trying not to get killed because this is a very dangerous place. And that's all it needs to be. Like, I don't know, people seem to have this idea that the first story needs to be this big, grand, epic thing, when really it doesn't. I mean, I like the fact that it's just a small, straightforward, dealing with cavemen story. I mean, it doesn't need to be anything more complicated than that. It's perfectly functional. It adequately gets the concepts across. We see many facets of the core characters emerge over the course of that story, and it's great. It's just a lot of fun. I mean, it's a good old fashioned escape and getting re-caught over and over again story, which we've seen a million times over the course of Doctor Who. So I don't know why people have such a problem with this story doing that when that has been a trope of Doctor Who for 50 years since. I don't know. People are weird. I like it. I like An Unearthly Child. I will freely admit the first episode is the strongest of that whole story arc, but I enjoy the whole thing. Okay, I guess I went into it a little more than I meant to there. Anyway, read the book. Now, in this case, the book was written by Terrance Dicks, who is easily the single most prolific author of Doctor Who stuff ever. This man knows his Doctor Who. I mean, he not only wrote a bunch of stories for the show itself, he was the script editor for the show itself for a good number of years, and he's probably written more of the Target novelizations than anybody else. So this is he was like the go-to guy for Doctor Who stuff. It's like, oh, we can't get the author of the original script, well, just get Terrance Dicks to do it. you know, so he was kept very well employed throughout the entire run of the classic series. Um, yeah, I mean, I think he started as like the coffee boy or something. I mean, he worked his way up and has held that position at the top for a very long time. I mean, the man's a legend. But yeah, so anyway, my first experience with that first story was the novelization of An Unearthly Child, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, to me, there's always been this, especially for longtime fans or even new fans who are experiencing the early adventures for the first time. There's some kind of sense of wonder when you watch that very first episode. It's like this is it. This is ground zero. This is where it all began, and you can't help but feel almost a sense of reverence for that episode, just because it spawned such a legacy, that it starts so simply and so straightforwardly, and it has just become this huge thing over the years. And there really is a sense of wonderment. I remember when I finally did see the first episode, when it finally aired, PBS was showing the Tom Baker adventures and the Tom Baker and John Pertwee adventures Monday through Friday in the afternoon. And then on Saturdays, I think it was Saturday, Sunday, they had two. They would show the so-called omnibus editions of the earlier adventures. So they had them edited together into movies. So I remember the very first time I saw An Unearthly Child on TV. Now, by this point, I had read the novel, so this is the first time I had seen it in visual form. And I remember even my dad, who was never particularly a Doctor Who fan and just kind of found it annoying that I was so obsessed with it, when that opening scene comes on, the opening theme starts up just with the video interference and the logo, and then the theme keeps going as it goes to the flashlight and the cop walking around at night, and he shines the light on the junkyard sign, and just keeps walking, and then the camera goes into the junkyard and then up to what we later learn is the TARDIS. For all the first time viewer in 1963 just sees it as a police box, yet it's making this strange humming sound. So what's going on there? There's obviously something not what it seems with this police box, and it's great. But I remember during that whole opening scene, the Doctor Who theme continues to play. And it was the only time, really, that the theme song ran into the show. Prior to that, it was, after that, rather, it was only ever for the actual titles. But, so it runs into the show, and I remember I talk about that sense of reverence. Even my dad, he was in the basement just puttering around doing something. When that first episode came on, he stopped what he was doing, and he stood and watched silently as those first few minutes of the episode played. And the only comment he made was, "Oh, it's kind of weird they keep the theme going, eh?" I'm like, yeah. It's just... but even he understood. Like, this is... He knew what a huge fan I was, and he knew that this was a big moment for me to actually finally see, after all these years, episode 1 of Doctor Who. Yeah, but my first experience with that story was the novelization. And for both of these stories, in the back of my mind, as I was seeing the televised versions for the first time, I still had the novelization in my head. So I would see things on screen and hear in my head the little extra bits from the novels that fleshed out those moments. So it's kind of weird. You end up with this weird hybrid in your brain where you're seeing what you're seeing on screen is only part of what your brain is fully processing. It's like you've got all these different versions of the story floating around in your head. There's what you're seeing and there's what you've experienced before. And as you're watching in real time, you're kind of mixing the two together and getting this fuller experience. Another one that I definitely have that experience with all the time now is, I've talked about this one before, is Ghostlight. The novelization of Ghostlight adds so much to this story. Once you read that novel, you can never look at this story the same way again. So, Ghostlight, yeah. Even if you hate the show or the story, read the novel, and then go back and watch it again. I guarantee you will look at it in a completely different way. And that's another beautiful thing about the novels is they're not just straight up adaptations of the story. A lot of them are, to be honest, but the better ones are the ones that leave a lasting impression with you. I mean, here I am talking about these like literally about 30 years after I read them, and they're still fresh in my brain because they left that mark, and that mark has just been further ingrained in there as I've watched the televised versions and mixed all those things together in my head. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. All I know is I'm enjoying a lot of Doctor Who, and that's not a bad thing. Alrighty, so that's going to be it for this week. So next week, we'll talk about some of the second Doctor stories that I first experienced in novelized form, and some of the missing ones that I experienced for, in some cases, the only time in in novelized form. Was there some there? No, there was some that I originally experienced that were missing, and then later were made available in some form. And we'll talk about those as well. But that'll be next time. Second Doctor stuff. Alrighty. That is it for this edition of Timey Wimey Tuesday. Target memories. Gotta love them. Yeah, so quick thank you to my Patreon sponsors. Special big thanks to Kimberly Harmon and Kyle Pellegrini, my two highest level sponsors. Really appreciate the support, guys. And big thanks to everyone else, too. You're all just helping to make this even more possible on a more regular basis. So you all rock. Alrighty. That is it for me to you for now. So until next time, thanks for watching, and sayonara.